Hi, this is Mike Gant, and this is episode 19 of Bible Mechanics. The last couple of episodes, I've talked with you about the C.S. Lewis quadrilemma, as it were. He didn't ever call it that. I don't even know if he used the word trilemma, but other people have, because it has three positions. Jesus was either liar, lunatic, or Lord. And then we talked for a couple of episodes about this fourth L that has arisen in our lifetimes, that people have called legend, alluding to the fact that modern biblical scholars follow a methodology called historical criticism, which I look forward to telling you about in one of these episodes. And that methodology leads them to conclude that there are only 7 of the text in the New Testament where the author is known. And that just creates this big hole that they just run all kinds of stuff through. And by all kinds of stuff, what I mean is they say things like, well, people back then, they were an oral culture primarily because literacy rates weren't high. And they would add things to the story. It's just like the telephone game, and people add things to it. And so all kinds of stuff got in there, and there were written documents, other documents that we can't find that obviously were guiding them. I mean, it's very convoluted. And it's just the type of thing that happens when people get too smart, too big for their britches. And they trace their methodology back to the Enlightenment, which you figure whenever you start calling yourself bright, that's not a good sign. Jesus said we should be like little children and recognize and humble ourselves and not think that we're bright. But anyway, I want to get back to that at some point in time. I want to get back to the quadrilemma specifically, and then to historical criticism as part of that coverage. But I thought at this point it would be good just to go back to the fundamentals, to make sure we're keeping our framework in mind. And so today I want to talk about, breaking down. Let's see what kind of title I wrote for myself here. Breaking down the Bible. And that means breaking it down, how did it come together? Because the Bible is obviously a collection of books, a collection of text. Some of them are one page long. So it's a little odd to think of that as a book. But the different texts or writings that are included in the Bible are frequently called books. So that's all that means. But they're not books in the sense of, like the Bible's a book. So the Bible is a collection. And I want to show you how to break it down, which essentially means showing you how it was written in the first place and how it came together. Because the Bible is an ancient collection of even more ancient writings. It's an ancient collection of even more ancient writings. So when you say the Bible, you're talking about a collection. Now, of all the Bibles out there, there's different translations. I'll talk about that in another episode. In this episode, I just want to talk about the original texts themselves. And there are basically 4 kinds of Bibles in circulation today. 3 of them have the New Testament, 1 of them doesn't. That's because there are 3 branches of Christianity. There's the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and Protestant churches. Those are the 3 main branches of Christianity. And they all use exactly the same New Testament, 27 books in all of them. Therefore, and the 4th kind of Bible is a Jewish Bible. Of course, they don't have a New Testament because ancient Jews did not accept Jesus as the Messiah. So if you've got a Bible that's got 2 testaments in it, it's going to be the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's what they're all going to have. And there's only going to be 3 of those Bibles, 3 kinds, and that's Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Protestant. And the New Testament will be identical in all 3 of them. Now, what's different about the Old Testament? It's just some additional books in the Old Testament. For example, this, let's see what it is. This is a Eastern Orthodox Bible. This one's called the Orthodox Study Bible. And it has, I can't remember the exact number of Old Testament books it's got, but it's got more extra books than the Catholic Bible's got. Here's a Catholic Bible. See, they're all kind of the same size. They're not that different. Again, New Testament's identical. The Roman Catholic Bible has a few more Old Testament books than the Protestant Old Testament. Protestant Old Testament. And Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox Bible has even a few more than that. So, like the Book of Maccabees, I don't remember all their names. I don't study them a lot. They've got some additions to certain books. But those extra books are called the Apocrypha. And we don't need to be concerned about those. They're books that you can read. They may have some value, but they're not considered part of the Old Testament by the Jews, which is an important point I want to make about the Protestant Bible, and that is that the Protestant Bible and the Jewish Bible are identical when it comes to the Old Testament. The Protestants just accept the Jewish canon, it's called, and don't add anything to it like the Catholics and the Orthodox do. And I think that's right, because Jesus said salvation is from the Jews. And at the time, and Paul says that the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God, meaning the scriptures. So I think it's, Jesus was basically assigning that responsibility of determining the Old Testament canon to the Jews. And since that's the one the Jews came up with, that's the one the Protestants accept, and I believe that's the right one to accept. And then, as I said, there's not even any choice to be made when it comes to the New Testament, because there's no disagreement about what it is. So where did these collections, where was it decided that these books would be in here? It was decided by ancient Jews and ancient Christians. Ancient Jews selected the books in the Old Testament. Ancient Christians selected the books in the New Testament. Now, you might say then, well, if ancient Christians selected the books in the New Testament, why didn't they select the books in the Old Testament? Well, they did, but here's the thing. In the first century, when Jesus and the apostles lived, Jews were dispersed all around the world because of the conquest of Jerusalem back in 586 BC. And so most of the people in the world at that time in that part of the world spoke Greek. So there was a translation of the Old Testament into Greek. It is called the Septuagint. So this Septuagint is the Greek Old Testament. The Jewish Old Testament is the Hebrew Old Testament. But the Septuagint had more books in it than the Jewish version. And as I said earlier, those additional books are called Apocrypha. And the Eastern Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholic Christians decided that they wanted to include some of those deuterocanonical, they're called deuterocanonical or apocryphal books in their Old Testament. The Protestants didn't. But that's where those extra books came from. But even the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics recognize that there's something different about those books. They recognize that, Jews in Israel proper did not accept them. Now, I realize that might be a lot to throw at you at one time, but I wanted to show you that beneath all the words and everything, there's a real consistency there. The Old Testament comes from the Jews, ancient Jews. The New Testament comes from ancient Christians. Modern people are not deciding this kind of stuff. These ancients decided that, and we can either accept it or reject it. And of course, I believe we ought to accept it. I believe they knew what they were talking about. And that's the foundational starting place for us. We'll go from here. But now you've got the basic idea. I'll mention these facts as we go through it. Talk to you later.